welcome aboard the Margaret K. This is Richard Keen's boat and we are heading up to a shipwreck which is called the Stella. It's approximately 24 miles north of Guernsey and 8 miles west of Alderney, next to the Casquets reef. For me, this is probably the best wreck in the Channel Islands, and we're extremely lucky to have Richard Keen with us. He was the one who discovered the Stella way back in 1973 with his friend Fred Shaw, whilst looking for another high profile shipwreck. Is that the rocket hit? The Wild Rock?
Came down here, hit that little black cross probably.
Ah.
Little reef there. I would think there'd be a fair few rivet heads. Nobody knows the full story, but I think Black Rock, which was on the starboard side of the boat, you saw the Casquets right on the side, so I think he just went, well, look up there, between those two big head and the small head.
It just drifted south and then sunk?
Yeah. I think one of the engines came off the engine beds because it hit at speed. The force buckled the ship's hull and basically the engine parted company with the engine beds, and that must be quite exciting that the steam pipe might have sheared, so that would make you evacuate the engine room quite quickly.
That would have been nice for the stokers and stuff.
No, I mean it must have been, when you do hit a rocket speed and keep going, the boat lurches up and it passes over. I think the report said the engine broke free of the engine. That would be quite exciting, a lot of moving machinery and
big heavy machinery.
yeah. And we know that yeah, that's quite impressive. One of the propeller plates is missing. I don't know whether that happened when it hit the sea. Or well, we'll see.
Afternoon, Bachelor's new crew.
What's that? Some white water.
It's still there.
I'm not sure how much is still there.
Well, it drops a
That's
bit
it.
lower each year.
That's it here.
Look at that, 43 metres.
That's nice, 43. Beautiful. Casquets, the three lighthouses. Stella left Southampton at 11:25 AM, heading for Guernsey and then Jersey. By 4 PM, running in thick fog, she hears the foghorn of immense strength directly above him. Bell Lookout yells, "Stop her!" and an immense rock appears 80 yards ahead. At 8 minutes past 4, she sinks below the waves.
Stand by! Okay! So that's gone.
That one in a wanna.
All good.
Well, we're just about to go under.
There's a bit of tide there still.
Yeah, might not get. Let's hope I hope we see it again. Eh?
Yeah, it'd be lovely to see that one again. She's going deep.
I think it's hooked into something.
She's going deep. The London and South West rail steamer, the Stella. At 1,059 gross tons, 253 feet long, 35.1 feet wide and 14.8 feet deep. She was a passenger ferry, built by James and George Thompson Limited, Clydebank, yard number 252. Richard has put the shot right at the bow. I'm going to swim as far as the engine room and back again. This shipwreck is in fair condition given age, with the rear missing and also some of the decks. I'll talk you through this dive and show you what's left. We should have landed on the forecastle deck, which is this one here. This deck is no longer on the shipwreck, with it completely being stripped off. We know this because the first thing we do is see toilets, and there was no toilets on this deck. Let's make ourselves familiar with the ship layout. We're currently at the bow area. This deck is actually missing, which is the forecastle deck. Well, not completely missing, because we still see remnants of it, with columns and bits of ribs still hanging in there. Here's some of the columns to our left. Me and Paul were actually really shocked. 124 years and under the sea and there's still water in the toilets. Only joking. The slenderness of the ship at the bow is because it's missing a whole deck. With the curve of the sides, it now looks like this. Me and Paul are currently swimming through the WC, the lamp room and the chief officer's quarters. Laying on this main deck are some steam pipes, about 4 inches in diameter. These would have been the supply for the winch that weighed the anchors. We can actually see them here. They're falling off the ceiling and they're laying on the floor, highlighted in red. The bollards, which would have been on the deck above as well, have now fallen down and are laying scattered over the deck. This hatch probably would have had some butterfly lights on. Basically wooden hatches on top that let light to the deck below. There's also loads of other brass surrounds, probably off of these deck lights. Here you can see Paul heading down the staircase to the second-class gent saloon. The staircase is well rotted away now. We do know from reports that there was actually a fair few people in this saloon at the time of the striking, due to the fog being so thick it was making their clothes wet. crazy to think 124 years under the sea, and there's still actual timber here. This would have been probably the threshold as you walk through the door and down the stairs. This is the main deck, and we're just forward of the wheelhouse. Here is a spare Troutman anchor up against the bulkhead, got an edge for its time. The two round holes next to it that go down below deck are ventilator pipes. All this area would have been out on deck and exposed to the weather. Here we see the escape shaft, or the vent from the boiler room. Check out the ladder. The opposite corner is the ash hoist hole and vent. This area of the ship was known as the quarterdeck. Coming back inside the boat from the outside deck, we're flying now over the hole where the funnel used to be. All the structure is now collapsed inwards, including a davit from one of the lifeboats. You can see the tile here. It's not surprising it's landed inside here. This was from the bridge deck, which was the one above. As we zigzag between the huge copper pipes, we pass back out onto the quarterdeck on the port side. Here you can see another davit, which would have taken a lifeboat. Also another toilet, which would have been used for the passengers whilst out on the quarterdeck. So once again make ourselves familiar where we are. The toilet we have just passed is the top centre of the screen. Now we're going to swim into the engine room. We're now right above a lobby. You can see the original tile still on the floor. This was a small room alongside the toilet cubicle where you would have had two wash-hand basins to wash your hands. Here's some of the original tiles. Here's a part of the machinery, with a large conger poking his nose out. Most of the original machinery is still in place. Very little salvage was done in this shipwreck, and now benefits from the fact it is protected. One of the benefits to exploring shipwrecks is like a 3D museum. We're now floating above the engine room. These round shapes here are the top of the cylinders. These are very large engines, and 2 of them as well. This is an image of them when they were getting built in the workshop. Now we can't see the full extent of them as the engine bay is completely silted up, almost to the top of the cylinders. There is even a winch that has fallen from a deck above, now jammed between both engines. There is a load mall structure astern of this, which would have been the first class accommodation. I'm not going to go that far, I'm going as far as this bulkhead. Frame number 50 of 132. Swimming down and under this deck is probably the most scenic part of this dive, so I am a bit hesitant to turn around and head back. For me, a dive on the Stella is very, very relaxing. I'm sure this wasn't the case after they struck the rock, and it wouldn't be right not mentioning the loss of life on this shipwreck. As she was classed as an excursion vessel, they never really kept a good log of who was on board. 105 people were thought to have been lost on this shipwreck. Varying numbers of people were on board at the time, with some stating 139 passengers and 42 crew, heading back to Guernsey and Jersey on Maunday Thursday for their Easter break. It would take far too long to summarise all their stories, so we'll just have a look at it in general. As to be expected, it was on the front of all major newspapers. The Graphic, the Illustrated News, the Illustrated Police News, to name a few. Of curved metal was a davit which would have lowered one of the lifeboats. After a lengthy inquiry, it was found the Stella was adequate for safety gear. There was more than enough life jackets for everybody, and the ship would have carried a lot more when it was busy. Saying this, there is also accounts that the life rafts that were launched were overloaded, with some of them tipping upside down, and people clinging to the side, 14 in number of one of them. A really harrowing story of their survival as a wave flips the boat the right way round, but then they realise there's no plug to plug the hole as they drift in the water for up to 14 hours up to their waist in cold water. As people were dying from exposure, they're having to place the bodies over the side of the boat, with one mother having to do it to her child, and then shortly after succumbing to the cold herself. Of course, there was survivors, and they account the story quite vividly. Formal identification of the shipwreck was done via the finding of the bell, although I'm sure Richard knew what it was as soon as he set eyes on it. This is the approximate position where Richard found the bell. Here you can see the sister ship with the location of the bell. This is the Frederica, just next to this winch. This is the winch you can see ahead of us now. On a cross section you can clearly see the bell next to the winch. Me and Paul Carre swim back towards the bell. We see our strobe flashing in the distance. Not wanting the dive to come to an end, we start looking down hatches. This is looking down into what would have been the second class. Looking like something out of a horror movie, as the planking on the floor is now given way. You can see right down into the bells of the ship. Lovely ornate brass coverings on the steam central heating system of the ship. With plenty of air left, but 17 minutes total time to surface, we really should be thinking about heading up. My limit for this dive was 20 minutes, but I think we've just got enough time to have a look right up the bell. This square hole that goes down through the deck is actually a scuttle hole. There's also round tubes that take you down to a chain locker. The stem has been bent over to the right hand side, and the base of the crane is still there, just forward of the scuttle hole. The crane is on the seabed with the square base of the crane sticking up in the air. I believe that's the base of the crane, buried in the sand. You can see all the plates on the side now starting to come away. You can only stand the tide for so long. Out of respect, I feel that we should mention 3 other people that was connected with this shipwreck. The commander, Captain Reeks, chief engineer and others, with half the crew, perished on board the vessel. Mr. Wade, the chief officer who was in charge of the boat, carrying 30 or 40 people, lost his life with them. Also the heroism of the captain's boy. Another instance of heroism displayed by many of those who perished has been reported. The call boy, whose duty is to stand by the captain awaiting orders, declined to leave his post, although the captain urged him to do so, and he was seen on the bridge as the Stella disappeared. Mary Rogers was instrumental in saving the life of a lady friend. Miss Rogers was a stewardess. A man related this story to a gentleman on the Vera. The latter stated that Mrs. Rogers was great presence of mind, got all the ladies from her cabin to the side of the ship, and after placing life belts on as many as were without them, she assisted them into the small boats. Then, turning around, she noticed that the narrator was without a belt, whereupon she insisted upon placing her own belt upon the lady, and led her to the fast-filling boats. The sailor called out, "Jump in, Miss Rogers," and the latter replied, "No, no, if I get in the boat it will sink. Goodbye, goodbye." With uplifting her hands she said, "Lord have me," and immediately the Stella sank beneath her feet. And the last person that's worthy of a mention is Miss Greta Williams, who behaved so courageously at the wreck of the Stella, remaining for 14 hours in an open boat, and calming the fears of the crew and fellow passengers by singing "O Rest in the Lord." The loss of the Stella was because the Captain Reeks had been travelling too fast in the fog and misjudged how far he had actually been, and resulted in hitting the Casquets and sinking the vessel. Thanks for coming along on another dive, and I'll catch you on the next tide.